believe I heard, was the MIC chance versus
Pages old.
Yeah.
Be a KU.
That was in fun though.
But
Yeah.
Oh,
He's a KU guy. He's
oh, Gary Woodland, yeah. No one else would like it.
I told Tom the house would be a couple minutes late.
Okay.
I think I may have just seen him running across the parking lot. Someone's running across the parking lot.
Okay. Okay. All right. It's 4:30. Oh, we got to go into our work session.
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
Hey, Kyle.
Well, you got to leave. You've got to be a few minutes late. All right. Let's call to order the work session Tuesday, August 14th, 2018, and I will entertain approval of the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any public comments?
No.
No one listed.
No one listed.
Okay, so now we will adjourn out of the work session. I will entertain a motion to do that.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and now let's move into, I'll call to order the monthly board meeting, Tuesday, August 14th, 2018. And I will entertain a motion to approve that agenda as well.
Move that we approve the agenda. However, I'd like to change the ratification of support staff from that of consent agenda to requiring action. So that would be B on the consent agenda, bring it up to B on requiring action.
Okay. Motion. Second. All right. Can we do a roll call on that? No. Okay. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right.
All right, first item under information. By the way, if you haven't noticed, school is starting tomorrow, so we've got all
I
this
didn't
stuff
notice.
going on, and part of that is our co-curricular activities, and Andy McGill here, who's our athletic director, is going to present that information on co-curricular extracurricular participation. So Andy, I'll turn it over to you.
I believe you guys had a report from last year's recap, and I'll just highlight a few things. I won't read it to you, but we had 207 boys and 159 girls that lettered for varsity and junior varsity with a total of 366 students. As far as team statistics, we've had a conference championship and a district championship in boys basketball. That was the only team sport that we had championships in last year. And then our cheerleading squad got first place at state competition. And our boys basketball earned a fourth place showing at last year's Final Four. As far as individual statistics, we had 23 students that were awarded first team all conference honors. We had 33 students that were awarded first team all district and all region. We had 6 students that were named first team all state. 3 cheerleaders, Ashley Gilman, Kylie Lawson, Alyssa Nolan. And we also had Fred Thatch, a boys basketball player, and he was also Class 4 Player of the Year. We had a girls track athlete, Gloria Bennett, that earned first team all state in both shot put and discus. And then Tyreek Jamison earned first place honors at boys track and shot put. We also, last year, recognized 20 local athletic scholarships that were awarded, and then 11 athletes from last year's class plan to attend college and pursue athletics. We also had academic honors. We had 88 of our varsity student athletes that were recognized as all-conference academic. We had 30 student athletes that were recognized to be all-state academic within their respective state associations. And then our baseball team, first time in recent history, was named Class 4 First Team Academic All-State with a team GPA of 3.70. We recognized 29 three-sport athletes, 18 varsity, 11 junior varsity athletes. And then last year, we kind of vamped up our all-sports banquet. We did a lot of different things for them. We're proud of that. We held that on May 11th in the field house. And Chris Popes, the former sports writer from the Standing Democrat, was our guest speaker. And you guys might have known or seen the paper, but fall sports practices started this past Monday.
Andy, has our cheerleading team, the numbers and stuff, has that changed where we're in a different, I'm in cheer, so I don't know how to say it right, but have we changed from being in a different competition when we're vying for positions?
So as far as I know for cheerleading, it all depends on our student population, depending on what class, and then we have an option to choose from a bigger squad or a smaller squad.
We went to a smaller.
We went to a smaller squad.
Okay,
this past
that's
year.
what that was
Yeah.
a change. Thanks.
Yeah, but that's an option for the coaches to choose from.
I'd like to point out, if my math is correct, that we had approximately 25% of our student athletes be recognized for an academic honor. 88 divided by 366. That's pretty.
Actually, it would be by, I would need to do the math on that. That's varsity and junior varsity. If you're a junior varsity letterman, you cannot be recognized for the all
Okay.
conference. It would be varsity letterman only.
Okay, so it's
So
even
I would need,
higher.
it should be higher.
Yeah, okay, great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. That is awesome. That's pretty cool.
Yep.
Any other questions for Andy? Thanks, Andy.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Thanks.
Hey, can you hang around for another 30 minutes? I'm kidding.
Did you see the look you got?
Yeah.
Yeah. Next on the list is the retention rates, and Lynn Crater is going to present that information.
Hey folks, I hope you have that in your packet there. We have a total of 24 this past the end of the school year that are being retained for this time here. The bulk of those from kindergarten, which is always the case. Just as a matter of historical perspective, we had 23 last year, so it's up just one. We usually run around 23, 24, 25, somewhere in there. Typically, it's done at kindergarten level. So that's where it's recommended. If you need to retain somebody, try to do it there. And there'll be one or two you can see here at an older age, but most of them are kindergarten or first grade.
Do you ever have any that have to be retained twice in kindergarten?
Probably, I just can't think of one right now, but I'm sure that's happened. And some parents will request that they be held back. If they were kind of young when they started or immature when they started, they'll actually ask that. So it's voluntary. That's a decision we make with parents, though. We sit down and we look through a checklist of items. It looks at grades, maturity, size, a whole lot of things, so that we make that kind of get consensus from everybody before we do that. We rarely would hold one back without the parents' support.
May I ask a question? Did you mean retain twice in kindergarten, retain again?
Yes.
Yeah, we rarely, if ever, do that. Because then you end up with a very old child in elementary school.
Yes.
And honestly,
7-year-old
yeah,
kindergarten.
yeah, you can have some success with the one-time retention, but with two, it's rarely beneficial a second time. I didn't.
No, that's fine. I didn't know the answer. I just figured.
Any other questions for Mr. Crater on retention rates? The next item, where you stand up, Land is nonviolent crisis intervention training. Mr. Crater, and this is something that, and I don't want to steal his thunder, but this is something that his group, the 5 individuals, our leaders, set up on Friday
Right,
and went through a mass training.
exactly.
So I'll let you go
Well, I'm
ahead.
glad you said that because that's not in this report. This was everything from last August through May. So that's not going to pick up what we just did. But this gives you an idea what we did during the last school year. We had 3 initial trainings, 3 refresher trainings. You can see 42 were trained in initial, 32 folks had the refresher through the school year. And then the list of our folks who do it, they all 5 of us have to go get certified, and we have to go back within a couple of years and get recertified. So it's a pretty big deal. It's a 4-day certification process and then a 2 full-day recertification process. Just to give you some perspective, CPI has been in our district now for 8 years, going into the 9th year of that. We've offered 92 classes over that time frame. 1,562 folks have participated. Now some of those will be repeats because you have, once you get the initial, you have to get refreshed. And then we have 723.5 course hours. But back to what Mr. Williams is saying, this time we put the training at the beginning during those in-service days for different reasons. It's better to have it, I think, early in the school year, so you have that training fresh. You can use it from day one. But also, if we do it during the school year, you have to pull those folks out of class to do it. You have to get subs to do it. So it was hard to get it in with all the things that are going on, all the new requirements that we have. By law, and there's a bunch of stuff all of our folks have to have, so that was a tough gig, but we did it. We did limit it to 20 people, so we did 20 per instructor in the morning, and we did another 20 per instructor in the afternoon. So we got about, what is that, approximately 200 folks got trained in one day that way. That's not everybody, but that was the bulk of them. I had special training a couple days earlier for the nurses so they could get done. They did not have to be trained. We did the aides and assistants in the spring of this year, so they would be good for another full year. And then there's still some folks that didn't get picked. We randomly picked, so some of the folks who never wanted to do CBI training suddenly wanted to do it because they weren't picked. But we'll just have to figure out how we're going to go back. Can't win. Nobody ever wants to do CBI again until you leave them out. So, but we'll pick up the others either somehow this school year, or we may just get the other half of the group, whatever's left over at the beginning next year. We may just need to go to a 2-year cycle.
Did our the suicide prevention, the new laws there, that got rolled into this?
No, that was a separate,
Oh,
we had separate training for that yesterday. Yeah.
We divided it into 2 groups and had the elementary in the morning and then had the secondary in the afternoon. And so everybody went through that along with dyslexia training. They got 1 hour of that, and we're going to fill in during the course of the year to get the other training.
Did we name who our key people are going to be for that?
We have not yet, no. I still think there's a lot of planning left in this. I think it's so new and so.
Well, we'll back up a little bit.
Did you?
We use Boot Hill Counseling. They're the ones that provided our training, and they actually trained the counselors separately. So the counselors have not specifically been named as far as the policy. That's who is going to probably be in each building based on the training that Boot. That's kind of where Boot Hill's going with that. So they've given them a little different and much more extensive training.
And that's a natural fit. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because we don't want to have our policy say we have to do X, Y, and Z, and then something happened to somebody, and they say, well, you didn't even have somebody appointed for your policy, you know.
And I'm meeting with Mr. Carroll at Boot Hill next week to get them more involved with those counselors as well. I had actually
That's great. Good.
to follow up with that.
Thanks, Shannon. Any other questions on CPI for Mr. Prater? Okay, number 4 is the tax rate hearing, and that has been set for August 28th, 2018 at noon. We need a quorum on that day, and I had listed 4 individuals, so we need to have that quorum because we need to get that sent out. Lori needs to go ahead and post that. She has 7 days prior to post that and get that information out. Not 14 days, but 7 days. And so that information is out there and the public is aware of it. Okay. All right, next item, moving on into required action. Number 1 is reconsideration of Wing Elementary local vendor preference. As you recall, back in May 29th actually, the Board of Education was given a presentation about Bill Giesing with Rock Miller Construction. And Bill is our CM at risk. And so he presented the information as far as the subcontractors and the bids and everything. And that information then, and part of that, well, let me just go through, and I like to read the minutes from that, just so that it's clarified. It said, Mr. Giesing recommended that guaranteed maximum price, which was $9,436,570. The Board of Education discussed the subcontract bids with Mr. Giesing. The board also discussed local vendors and requested that Mr. Giesing inform the board of local vendors that may be utilized. The Board of Education discussed the bids as listed on page 6 of its Exhibit A, which is included in here, subcontract list. Specifically, the Board of Education discussed bids 3A, 5, 6, and 10 on the subcontract list by Brock Miller Construction, and determined after consideration that these proposals offer the best value for the district as Brock Miller Construction Incorporated was the actual low bidder on these items. Mr. Geesting asked for approval of the subcontractor list on the subcontractor list with a caveat that no contract be awarded on 7A until verification of the difference with local contractor Pyramid Roofing and a breakout in front of her of item 3B regarding local vendors, and approve guaranteed maximum price of that $9,436,570. Going on, Mr. Blease made a motion to approve the recommendation of the guaranteed maximum price in the subcontractor list, and then Mr. Cantrell seconded and it was voted on. So, from there, then information was sent to me on June 14th with the differences between the local bidders and what was actually bid or the low bid, and that information was sent out to the board. I did not hear back from the board. I don't remember the time period. It was a week or so. Bill had contacted me and I said I hadn't heard anything, so go ahead and move forward. Recently then I was contacted about this and was discussed last Thursday during a meeting. And in the course of that meeting, it was discussed to have Bill come in and talk about the process and what had taken place, and to basically just review that list. So, Bill, since we have you here, I include that information that you shared with me, which was the local suppliers, and then also the 2-page item. Then also talked about the additional cost, what the local contractors bid, and so on.
Right.
So, oh, it did not?
I've got a printout here, I'll go make
some copies.
Brian, I brought it.
Oh, okay.
I'll go ahead and hand that to everybody so you can see what.
Mine's on the server here.
And while we're talking about those minutes, I recall specifically we talked about how we were very interested and wanted to do wherever we could use our local contractors. And Bill, you said you understood that was part of, you knew we wanted to do that, and that was the main, that we didn't have to have the low bidder per se. We could opt to go for a local bidder if they were within a certain percentage. And I asked for all of the local bidders' bids from you to give me those so that the board could see them. Do you remember that?
Sure. And that's what I provided.
Well, all I got from Tom, which you sent him, was what the difference in the bid amounts were from the local bidders versus the non-local bidders. That's what I got from Tom. I didn't get the bids that our local vendors and contractors and subs and material providers gave you.
Okay, I didn't understand that you wanted the actual bid. I thought we were taking a look at what was the cost going to be additional to the low contractors to go to the local bidders. And so that's what I had provided.
This is on here on the second page.
It doesn't allow us to look at whether they're within a percentage range if we don't know what the bid
The
is.
second page has it.
What I got from Tom was, we were talking about Pyramid, we talked about splitting Pyramid out, and they had the low bid on the sheet metal
Correct.
versus Huffman on the roofing. And we asked if we could we wanted to split those out, if it could be done. So that was one of the things that we were looking into. And then I mentioned Stewart Steel had bid on the doors, frames, and hardware.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to know their number and where they were coming in. So the last thing I saw before I started inquiring again about 2.5 weeks ago was the difference in the low bidder versus the local bidder, not the bid amount. So I never did see that for the local vendors.
No, and I didn't send it. What I understood from the meeting was that you were looking for what the difference in cost was going to be to go to a local contractor versus who the low contractor was. So if you were looking for the actual numbers of their bids, I did not understand that, and I did not provide that. It's provided now on the second page. Tom had asked me to get that to you. Yeah, I didn't.
Because I asked for that again. That's what happened.
Yeah. I didn't understand that what you were looking for was whether they were in a certain percentage. I thought we were looking at what the cost add was going to be.
But we
yeah.
could have gone ahead and said, okay, it's $10,000 more, we still want to go with it, but that never got brought back to the board. That's my concern, is that we did not get to look over and make a decision on our local vendors. It just all of a sudden appears that it's just happened.
Well, and that was not something I had any control over. I provided that information to Tom, and he sent it out to the board. And after about 10 days, I said, Tom, do we have any answer back on this? Because it's been going on 3 weeks now, and we really need to get moving. We're in jeopardy of not only getting a late start, but also losing guaranteed pricing on some of our bid items. And that's when Tom told me, he said, Bill, I haven't gotten anything back yet. Let's go with it. And so I released all of the bidders per my recommendation at the board meeting.
Well,
So-
I received a copy of an email from you to one of our local contractors that said that the board decided to go with the lowest bid. So did somebody tell you that the board decided that?
Well, in my conversation with Tom, that he hadn't heard anything back, then I was to go ahead with the numbers that I presented, the contractors I presented on the low bid. I assume that was board action. So that may have been the inappropriate word. I should have said that the district has told me to go ahead and move forward with what I presented at the original board meeting.
Did you tell the local vendors that had bid on these things as soon as you made a decision per the conversation with Tom that they were not in the running anymore?
No, not immediately.
Is there a reason you didn't let everybody know they didn't get it?
Other than my primary action was to go ahead and let the people know that were approved, that they were approved, and then to follow along with the typical actions of getting them letters of intent, getting contracts out to them so we could get that moving ahead. So no, I never went back specifically to each of the local contractors and said, you were not selected.
On your doors, frames, and hardware bid specs, it's my understanding that nowhere in there did it say to bid on the install, that was not part of the specs requirement.
That's correct.
Okay, so how did that become, that was really, when you compare, what I know more details about is obviously Stewart Steel. When you compare Stewart Steel's bid without the install to the chosen contractor, they are tight, right there, less than 1% difference. So, did you make the decision to make the install be a part of the bid package?
It's always my decision as general contractor or the bidding contractor who does the install of any of the equipment. And
Right.
so part of my obligation to the school district is to try to source out the lowest cost for the construction of your building, whether that's something that I'm installing or whether it's something that someone else is installing. Now, in probably 99% of the construction projects that are completed, the general contractor or whatever contractor is doing the general trades portion, they're going to buy the doors, frames, and hardware, and they're going to install the door frames and hardware. But in this case, I had also asked some other companies that do installation of doors and hardware to give me a number to compare to mine, in the hopes that if they had a lower number than I did, I could bring that savings to the district. So Camarco, who had the low number on the material, the doors, frame, and hardware material, they had given me a price to install the doors and hardware that was lower than my price. So I included their installation in that. It was not a prerequisite, it was not a requirement. I just asked them if they were interested in doing it. Not all door frame and material suppliers install their own items. And so I didn't expect that each one would have that, and it wasn't written into the bid packages as a requirement. It was just something that I asked all three of the door frame and hardware suppliers if they could provide me numbers to do the install to see if I could bring you any savings on that.
Yeah, well, I would have thought that if you had a local contractor bidding on something and you were going to have the install be a game changer, that they should have been informed that, hey, if you can't install, I've got somebody who is, and that's part of what you need to give me a bid on it now. And when we're promoting our local contractors, that should be your number one thing too.
I'm not sure what you mean by a game changer, because no one was prohibited from providing me any of the numbers on this project. Everybody received equal notice about the projects, the requirements, when it was being bid, and any of them had full opportunity to provide me with whatever part of that package they felt they could perform. And I assume by what you mean, Rebecca, when you say game changer, is the fact that Camarco's entire package of the material and their install was less than Stewart Steel's material package with my install. And if that's what you mean by game changer, then I presented to the board the best pricing that was available, which was Camarco's complete package. And when you asked me to go back and let you know how much the difference was going to be for any local vendors or companies, because I had called Stewart Steel and I said, hey, can you provide me a price to do the install so that I could have an equal, an apples to apples number? And JJ said, no, not JJ, it was whoever
Mike
was.
Norton.
Mike said, we don't do install. And I said, okay, then I'll have to stay with my number.
But he didn't expect the local vendor who's bringing that in, who is usually 95% of the time, is just materials provider.
Sure.
So I would have expected somebody heading this construction, who I've told as a board member that you need to try to use our locals, that you should have said to a local, go out and get a price, because this is going to play a part in this, because they just don't do it, and it wasn't in the specs.
It wasn't in the specs, but the specs don't, they don't distinguish between who's providing materials and who's providing labor. You know, that's open to anybody that wants to bid on any of this work, and that's well understood in the industry. You know, each company that participates in the bidding process, they have to determine what is going to make them most competitive, because in our industry, if you're not most competitive, you're generally not getting the work. Now, I went to the step of asking them if they would give me a number to install the doors and the hardware. I didn't go to the step of saying that if you don't, you're likely not going to get this work, because that was not a determination that I could make. And from the board meeting that we had where I presented the numbers, I had said that it was about a $10,000 difference. And I didn't get any reaction from the board that that was going to be a deal breaker. It's actually one of the numbers that I thought was still within range, given the overall size of the project. Now, I could have gone to them and said, hey, you really need to find a number for the hardware, for the installation, so that I can give this to you. And
Or
then,
you can try to be competitive, and let's see if you can be competitive. Yes,
could.
and that would have been what I think I would have liked as a board member for any local bidder, for you to go and say, look, for you to be competitive, you know, I can't take you unless you're going to be able to do this. I'd like to use you. I'd really like to use you.
yeah.
Because we got nobody really.
I think that's putting a lot of onus on those guys. That's a little bit unfair and a sealed bid advantage. You can't give your bid and go back and go, oh, well, we would like to use it if you could still come in a little lower.
Well, then the
That's
sealed
not how it
bid should have
works.
been, Mr. Stewart, would you
That's
like
not
to
how it
speak to the
works. I would
issue?
like to.
Wait.
No, I mean,
Oh, I thought you were saying
it's up to you.
Well, the other concern I have is, and I understand what you're saying, if my primary responsibility is to try to get a local contractor involved in the project, and I don't have any other liability for how I conduct that business, there were probably ways that could have been done. But if I go to the local guy and I say, hey, you really need to find someone that's going to have an installation, and they really need to be at this overall number. Now, I and the board have opened ourselves up to the liability of
That's not the point.
the person
Chris,
that's,
hold on a second, you have to be addressed by the board.
the person that submitted the low bid. If I'm not going to them and doing the same thing, if I'm not going to whoever submits a low bid and saying, hey, look, I've gone to Stewart Steel and I've had to tell them that you need to give me an install number so that you can be competitive. Well, how can I not go back to them and say, hey, look, this is coming down to a horse race and you need to either cut your number. Well, there's some ethical issues in going back and trying to play people against one another that I don't believe is proper in our industry, and I don't believe would have been proper in this situation.
I just have, my concern and what seems unfair to me is that the install was not part of the bid specs, so unless you're told, I'm changing it and amending the bid specs, and now install is part of it, there would be no, because it was a matter of about $200,000, less than $1,000, I think, difference in those two materials prices.
You keep referring to a change in bid specs, but there was no change to bid specs.
Right.
As I said, the bid specs always remain the same, and who installs the materials that are on site is, throughout this process, open to any contractor that wants to bid on it.
Okay, could Comarco have installed Stewart Steel materials if they were the low install amount?
If they wanted to, yes, they could have. Are you asking if I could have used Comarco's installation number with Stewart Steel's material?
Sure.
No, because I didn't pursue that. I asked him, I said, look, would you be willing to install someone else's material if you don't get the purchase order for the doors, frames, and hardware? They said, no, we're only giving a price to install it because we're getting the work, if we get the work to provide the materials.
Did we ask that same question to Stewart Steel?
Hmm?
Did we ask that same question to Stewart Steel of you're only going to get this or potentially get this business if you can provide me a number?
I went to Stewart Steel, and without trying to lead them, without trying to tell them that they need to do this, I asked them, I said, look, can you provide me a price to do the installation of the doors and the hardware? And I was told, we don't do that. And please understand, I have no hesitations whatsoever using Stewart Steel. Stewart Steel did the predominance of our doors, frames, and hardware the first 8 years that I was here, from 95 through the early 2000s. And I still use Stewart Steel whenever I can. I don't use them as much anymore because they have stopped reaching up into the areas where I predominantly operate, St. Francis County, Jefferson County, because the suppliers that provide doors, frames, and hardware up there also get specialty frames from Stewart Steel. And so the guys at Stewart, Chris and JJ and Chris Kiesler, don't always want to bid up in that area because they're bidding against people that buy things from them. So there is no bias at all, unless you want to say that I didn't go far enough in telling them that in order to get this work, they needed to do this and do this and do this, which puts me in an ethical dilemma. How far do I go to tell them what the numbers are, where they have to be, if I'm not doing that for somebody else? And if I do that, and the low bidder on bid day doesn't get it, because I've basically gone to someone and said, here's where you need to be, which I consider to be unethical, telling someone where they have to be in an open bidding competition, then I leave myself at a liability for the person that was low, that didn't get it.
I think that you don't have to say, this is where you need to be. You need to say, I'm looking at an install price that you need to beat if you want, I'm not telling you what it is, but you got to give me something. If you don't have it, then you're out of the loop.
Rebecca, I think you're drawing fine distinctions between the process. How far is too far? Is it too far even to go to Stewart Steel and say, look, can you provide me an install number? Because they did not make that strategic decision as a company to submit with their bid an install number for their doors, frames, and hardware. They could have done that.
It's very
They did.
atypical, is isn't it, for a supplier like that to install? It's
Yes.
usually, yes, very
It is.
atypical.
It is very atypical. But was it prohibited? No. Did someone else take a look at doing that in order to make their package more attractive? Yes. And as a contractor, that's what I rely on all the time, is finding a way that my work can be more competitive than someone else's. And I have no obligation, no duty to go to my competitors and say, hey guys, I'm going to start installing fluid applied air barrier because I can do it cheaper than the masons can do it. Well, why would I tip my hand on what makes me more competitive? And this was not anything that I did to try to make Camarco more competitive. They came to me and said, hey, we've been doing installation of doors and hardware. Can I give you a number to do the install? I said, absolutely. I'll compare it to my numbers and any others that I received. So going to someone else and saying, hey, these people are making themselves more competitive by giving an install number, you need to do it too, goes against the grain of open competitive bidding.
I think just the opposite. Because I think if somebody does, it's an atypical thing to have a supplier install the doors. So it wouldn't be something that a bidder in this area would think, I better go find somebody in Missouri to give me an install price so I can bid on this project. It would be something they'd need to know was a game changer. That's what I think would have been fair, given the atypical nature of that. I also was curious as to why Pyramid Roofing, were you aware that Pyramid, I know that there was a warranty issue because of the Firestone roof, and the sheet metal, because they came lower on the sheet metal, and Huffman had put in bids for both, and we said take them up separately instead of as a package, and that there was a warranty concern with the Firestone roof and the sheet metal. And did you know that Pyramid Roofing contacted Firestone trying to get this, have this project, understanding the warranty was an issue, and said if we do XYZ to where these two meet, will you warranty this work? And Firestone said, yeah, we will. And then 1 week later, Pyramid got a phone call, because I thought this is weird, they're out all of a sudden. And then a week later, they got a phone call from Firestone, and they said, I'm sorry, we can't warranty it on this project. You know what happened there?
No, but I can speculate what happened is that during the bidding period, Pyramid asked Firestone, who they are not, as I understand, a certified installer for. They asked Firestone for a number on their material, and Firestone was willing to do that. And then after the bids, when the board asked me to go back and take a look at the local contractors and what the difference would be to go to them, that means I also had to go back to the low bidder and ask them to break out their numbers, and I had to make sure that the scopes of both companies were equal. And in that process, I'm sure that Sheet Metal Systems, who was a certified Firestone installer, understood that the nature of what I was doing was comparing their numbers to the local guys, and they went back to Firestone, I'm assuming, and said, hey, look, are you selling Firestone material to someone that's not certified? Because if so, they were probably in jeopardy of not getting the project. And they probably compelled Firestone to retract their offer to sell the material to Pyramid. That's my assumption. And
I think it also had to do something with metal roofing that went around it or near it. Because I've talked to Lloyd at length about this, and there was something to do with the warranty not only on the roof, but with the flashing of the metal roof.
that was if Lloyd used a metal other than Firestone.
Oh, okay.
If they had been able to, if Firestone had continued their offer to let Lloyd use the Firestone material, as long as they would have given him certification, then using him and Huffman together would have maintained a complete warranty. But since Firestone pulled that offer to sell the material to him, he would have had to use Carlisle metal. And if he was using Carlisle metal, then he wouldn't have one warranty. And the warranty under SMS and Huffman is not just a material warranty, it's a weather type warranty. So anywhere from the edges of the roof or the sheet metal in, all that's covered. But if Lloyd, in his number, if he had used Carlisle, then you wouldn't have that weather type warranty any place that the metal occurred.
That's, okay.
Yeah, that was.
I just know that when I talked to Lloyd just recently, he said that it was after they were approached about doing just the sheet metal and dividing that out, and that's when he made the call to Huffman, or to Firestone, and they said they would warranty whatever work he was going to do where they were meeting. They would warranty that, and that he doesn't know why. A week later, he got that phone call that said, "Well, we can't do it on this job." So he doesn't know any of what you're surmising might have happened.
I think he probably does. You know, Lloyd made comments to me that, hey, I understand why Firestone is doing this. I understand, you know, wanting to protect your, protect the rights that you have as a certified installer. So he probably doesn't know with any more certainty than I do that what I assume happened actually happened. But I know that he probably has a pretty good idea of what happened. And I think he even made the comment to me that, hey, we've done the same thing. If we've got someone that's trying to move in on our work with a manufacturer that we're certified with and they're not, I've done the same thing. So I believe that he had a very clear understanding of what most likely happened and didn't seem to harbor any regrets against it. And in fact, it took us so long to get to the point that I could provide you this first list of what the costs were going to be to go to the local vendors, simply because of how long it took us to work with Pyramid and work through all the different issues of getting their numbers squared up with sheet metal systems, so that I could come to you and say, hey, here's a number that's going to cost you more to use Pyramid, with the certainty that it had everything covered. But I also had to tell you that it wasn't going to provide you a single weather type warranty over the whole roof.
Okay, I'm going to hit the last one that I've got, which is, it's my understanding that you reached out to Zellner to get a concrete bid.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well, let me clarify. I reached out to several contractors during the bidding period. My responsibility is to solicit the market in order to get qualified bids. So
yeah, that's a good thing. I'm not saying anything negative about that. If people aren't bidding, you say, hey, will you bid? But that they tried to contact and get bid specs on 3 different occasions by phone and never got a return call on getting them that information. You may not be aware of that.
No, I'm not aware of that. I don't know that they would have had any problems. I did talk to Brian with Zellner about the project. The plans were, as we talked about before, the plans were not only on my website, they were on all of the major data sites that are available, like Dodge and I Square Foot. So they were made available through at least 5 or 6 standard, but I think we even mentioned that of all the different outlets that the plans were available on, it probably numbered over 100, with the plan rooms and all of the different organizations and associations that they make the plans available through. So I find it odd that someone that's in the business couldn't find the plans and specs when they were available through so many different outlets, and by the fact that no one else has made that claim. Everybody else seemed to know where the plans and specs were and didn't have any problem finding them.
I can only guess that maybe it's because you had contacted them that that's why they came back to you to ask. But what's just so disturbing to me in the big picture is that we have an $11 million project. And I can't believe we don't have local people who are competitive with people from the St. Louis area and other places. And we have nobody.
Well, actually you do, and I tried to show on here those companies that did have local participation. SEMO Ready Mix is doing about $132,000 of the work. Steve Farrell Hauling is doing about $5,000 for the plumbing. He's going to do about $45,000 of the hauling for the site work contractor. He's going to do another $5,000 of hauling for the site utility contractor. Data Voice Security Systems is doing over $84,000 worth of work on the intercom and the audio.
Also, you guys use Sunny's for the roll-off stuff too.
I'm sorry?
Sunny Solid Waste.
Yeah.
That's an expensive.
That's what I was looking for. I had another list here of some of the other local vendors and suppliers. Sunny's is one of those.
Who's the concrete?
SEMO Ready Mix.
SEMO Ready Mix or Star Ready Mix. They're owned by the same company. I think it's on that, that front sheet. I don't have it with me, but there's several other companies in addition to Sunny's, the local building supply. Yes. There's gas stations, there's other quarries that are providing materials. Not every local contractor is included in the project, but I believe that those that had bid on the work and were qualified to do the work, that the cost to use them was presented to the board for consideration. And I never received a selection that, yes, we want to go with these people. But I do feel that that was brought out.
Well, you know, we all received an email. We all received this email with this information on it. And not one of us emailed back or called or said anything. So
I was waiting to receive what I asked for. That's what I was expecting and waiting for. I thought that was just the beginning of what we would see. I thought it was understood that we were going to be discussing again who we would consider, if anyone, in that bid. And it's only through asking again that I found out that this wasn't even in the bid specs to install. I didn't find that out until it was 2.5 weeks ago.
Mr. Stewart, is there something?
Yeah, I mean, I want to clarify something because there's no ethical issues in what has been brought up, period. You know, we never install, I never have, and you know that. And you know that 99% of the suppliers out there don't. And it's not, I've never lost a bid because someone else provided an install price, ever. This was a material supply price that we've always given you. You asked us on April the 19th, would also be interested in an installed number if you guys do that. And you know we don't. And so we told you we don't. And that's the last we ever heard. We reached out to you asking something about how the project's going. You sent us information after that, asking us to give ads and deducts and this and that. So we think we're in the game, Bill. We think we're in the game. And we're a local vendor, so it's not unethical to say, I've changed the spec on this job and I'm going to include installation from another company. So I want to make sure that you can't provide a price. You didn't do that. And that's what's wrong with this picture. You didn't do that. And so the board asked you to try to use local vendors as much as possible. and you didn't do that. And pardon me, but I mean, it sounds like from some of the board members that you're more interested in protecting Bill than protecting the local companies that are electing you and paying you. Because to me, you should be quizzing him on why this wasn't done the way it normally is and why we weren't given a second look. We weren't told the specs have changed because it's never included, and you know that.
Can I address your comments?
Yeah.
You both are saying that the specs have changed.
From
But-
what is normally done, Bill.
And Chris, what is normally done doesn't mean that it's not going to evolve or change, and there was never any requirement on any of the material suppliers that they provide installation numbers for their products. That was never a prerequisite to you being considered for the doors, frames, and hardware. But when another supplier has given me an install price to do the installation of the doors and the hardware, I've got to consider it. Let me play a different angle on this scenario, okay? So Camarco, and like you said, 99% of the suppliers out there don't do installation. But some of them do. And I'll tell you right now that both H&G Sales and Camarco have started doing installation on select jobs. So Camarco came to me and gave me a number to do the installation of those doors, frames, and hardware. So if I didn't consider that, and it beat my number, because if I'm getting numbers from somebody, I'm putting my labor to it. Well, I already had my labor figured out to install it. I looked at Camarco's installation, and they had me beat by $7,000 or $8,000. So if I didn't bring that to the board and said, oh, well, this is $7,000 or $8,000 that I really don't need to pass on. I can leave that $7,000 or $8,000 in my number, and I can get more overhead profit, and I can get more fee off that $7,000 or $8,000. How would you have thought about me in that situation if I wasn't bringing to you the maximum savings that I could for your project?
The point is, you didn't come back to us and say that.
But Chris, I don't have to. That
you
is
should,
not.
when the board gave you a directive to use as many local bidders as possible. You should have come back to us and said, I have made this part of the package.
I didn't. I didn't make it part of any package.
But you did.
No, I'm not so sure this is really, I think that the information has been shared, it's been put out there. There is an item here, reconsideration of Wig Elementary local vendor preference. So, I think the board has heard the information, and the board has presented the information that, if there's going to be a change, if that's what the board so desires, then you need to do so, correct? And there's also going to be a cost associated with that by doing a change.
I want to comment on that. I'm not looking for a change. I'm not looking for him to pull that job from Camarco.
But hold on just a minute, Chris. That is what we're discussing. That's a required action. Okay, that's what I put down today for the board to discuss, and that's for them to decide on that. So
that's fine. I think it'd be crazy at this point to do it. I'm just going to give you my professional opinion. But I just feel like we've not been given a fair shot. That's the way I feel, because things weren't. And I know you see it differently, and I believe you really feel that way, but I don't think that what the board asked you to do was done.
Well, and Chris, I personally wish you felt otherwise.
If you'd have called and said, I gotta have a bid price for installation if you want to be considered. That's all I'm asking for.
I've already stated to you and to the board.
Can you tell me why you didn't do that? It's not because of ethics. It has nothing to do with that.
It actually does.
No, it doesn't.
Then we
You go back and forth with suppliers all the time. You call them and say, hey, We've got to compare apples to apples, so if you're gonna do this, we gotta do that. There's nothing unethical because it's not typical.
I think we need to move forward.
Yeah, we've got to either make a decision or not make a decision. I think actually one or the other.
So let me ask this, if we did look at the material cost and the doors and hardware, obviously Camarco's not going to do the installation, but it sounds like Chris could if he had to. Does that change everything? Your suppliers have already ordered their stuff? Is there?
There would be additional cost to what's shown on there because we have already procured materials, some of the frames are on site. All of the shop drawing process has already been completed. So there would be a cost to Camarco to buy them out of what they have already done.
Then there'd be a cost, an additional cost we talked about having changing. There's an additional CM fee and a bond fee, and this is like a 10% number or something like that.
And Chris, I know you're not asking for that. It just, and probably should have personally been more involved. We hired you, Bill, to be and I know you're watching our dollars in a sense, but it's just frustrating to spend this kind of money and have very few local people doing it when their kids go to school here, they pay property taxes, everybody lives here. It is a little frustrating because I thought that's why we were hiring you.
It does feel like, especially the relationship that Rebecca has, it's clear to everybody in the room that if it's close, and it was, and it came down to the installation, man, it just seems like you should have called and said, I need an install cost right now. It just feels like that. Man, that should have been obvious. Even more so, I don't want to leave pyramid out of it, but even more so than the pyramid deal, it just feels like something should have been said.
Aaron, I appreciate that, but I feel like I gave the board the opportunity to select Stewart Steel when I gave to them what the cost difference was to use Stewart Steel versus using the low bids I recommended. I provided that to you. I waited 3 weeks, never got any response back. And that's when I called Tom and said, Tom, what are we doing? Because we need to get moving on this.
Well, I think then at that point, I'm going to say, Tom, if he was saying, I've got to know the answer to this, I think you should have then addressed us if you were going to give him an answer.
But I did address you. I sent you an email.
We didn't know he was saying, I've got to have the answer right now. We knew that he could begin the process.
We're getting into a point of figures.
Yeah.
And if you want to point a finger at me, that's fine. But I'm thinking that I sent you that information and I didn't get a response back. And we had several meetings even, I don't know, 3, 4 plus meetings during that time period, and nobody asked me about it at that time either. So
we left the meeting in May with, look, we're approving this.
I understand.
Lowest, the highest number you're gonna follow this. And we said, all we gotta do is get started. Down the road, we can change we can change up and look at these bids again. We just didn't do that. And I expected we would be doing it when the time came to be critical about it. I expected it would be brought up again and discussed.
Well, not only you, but none of the other board members contacted me on that. And maybe I should have reached out more to you, but at the same time, when I send out information.
Yeah, I think the onus would be on us rather than Bill or Chris. I think it would come down to us.
Well, were you wondering then? What about our local people?
Rebecca, we had the email. I had talked to Tom some regarding that. So, I talked extensively with Lloyd. I was involved in that process. That's why I knew a little bit about it. I didn't know as much about with Chris, obviously. But, at the end of the day, and I'm not saying we had $11 million, and I still got $11 million, and I know we told Bill, and I know Tom said it more than one point, it's not $11 million and $1, it's not $11 million and a nickel, it's $11 million or less. And that's pretty clear as well. And you're right, he did know that we need to use local guys, but point fingers and stuff now, I don't think it's productive, and we either need to make a vote or not make a vote, or, need to move forward.
Hopefully, we'll have another chance to do this, and we've all learned from it.
Yeah, I think there's some inexperience, at least
There's
from
definitely some
from
experience.
my end, maybe
I
not
think
Scott.
Bill
and
knows how we feel. We certainly know how Chris and
Yeah.
Rebecca feel.
Yeah.
And hopefully, we will have an opportunity to do this again in a couple of years.
Yeah,
And
certainly learn from it. There's no
what we
doubt.
learn from it.
And I understood how you felt also. Otherwise, I wouldn't have taken the time and effort to try to make sure I gave you good, accurate numbers of what it was gonna cost to go to the local contractors versus the low. And I do feel I provided that to you, just like you asked. I may have misunderstood that what you wanted was, here's their original number, here's their original number, and here's the difference. I thought you were just looking at what the ad cost was gonna be, so.
Well, and I still ferreted out to what my brother thinks about the bid situation, where the local vendors should have been allowed to understand what they needed to be doing to be competitive, or try to do. But I'm gonna then go forward to say that I would suggest we do not change anything at this point, because it's begun, and we would have an additional cost. So I mean, it's not about that. It's like, I guess I would let you know how important this is to us, that we are involving our citizens here in the community, and we had to find out, can anything be done to include them? And with the cost that has already started this process, then it would not make sense financially to do that. So
I think for all of us, the walkaway is, when Tom sends us information, if it's not what we're looking for, and I'm guilty, I didn't respond to anything. If we're going to be this involved when we're here in this room, when we do these special projects, I think it's a lesson for all of us that we pay attention and do, and not let an email slip through. I mean, I'm guilty of that.
I agree. Like I said, that's what I said. I think the onus is on us. We have as much culpability in this as anybody, because we have information, so.
Tom, I would ask you for one thing, not because my brother didn't ask me about this, but since his company's on here, I know I'm not asking for a change, but just what the percentage is that ESI was higher than the other, because it looks like it's about $1 million bid, but it's not really broken out.
I did not have that because KT Power, who had the original number, was unable to provide me in time to get this to you, what their cost was
What
for those
percentage of
items, and then what ESI's number was, so you can see the percentage. I did ask them to continue to try to get that to me, but I have never gotten that from them yet.
Is ESI bid under a different contractor?
ESI's scope would be under the electrical package.
Would they have bid under this?
They would have been under KT Power.
They would have been under KT?
They would have been under KT Power. So KT Power had in their bid that their own forces doing the fire alarm and the data cabling. And what I can tell you is for them to have ESI do those two things would have cost an additional $15,987 or $25,987.
Oh, it's an additional, that's not their bid?
That's not their bid, that's what the additional cost would be to go to ESI.
Okay.
I just couldn't give you what the base number was,
Okay.
so that you could figure out the variance by percentage,
Yeah.
which is, I think, what you were looking for.
Right.
Yeah, I don't have that information. I just have what the additional cost would be to go to.
Do we need to get that?
Well-
Because or is this already started too?
No, from that standpoint, those things come much later in the project, and I have asked Robin Tolbert with KT Power to go back and give me what their original number was versus ESI's, so you can see what the percent difference was. She's just struggled to be able to pull that apart and get that to me.
Well, I think we would have to, or do we want to spend an additional 42,000, have them do the work? Yeah, that's essentially what it comes down to. I don't know what percentage that is.
I don't either, and the other thing we'd have to take a look at, as I mentioned, a local company, Data Voice Security, is doing $84,000 worth of work for KT Power. what KT Power's not been able to tell me is if we use ESI on fire alarm and data cabling, if that will be pulling anything away from data voice services. So you may be paying more to get someone local, but taking something away from someone local that already has work.
Yeah, but I don't know the data voice security is in the district. They may have a Sikeston address, but
And that's what I
I
was
don't
going
know
with
if they're really
Scott.
in the district.
Yeah, she gave me their letterhead and had a Sikeston address, and that's why we considered it local, because they had a Sikeston address.
I know that they're the ones that do our security around the school
Did the
district.
field house, and then they did, they donated the speakers and stuff out of the baseball field. They donated that actually, the district park, I guess
So we need to require any action, or we'll just say
No,
we're
we
moving
don't have any
forward?
action today. Okay. You got
Anything else?
any? I'm good. Everybody good?
I'm sorry that you didn't feel that there was enough pursuit on this. I felt like I had gone to the lengths that you'd asked me to do and provided what was necessary in order to be able to make that decision. And as I told you at the very first meeting, I understand how important local participation is to bond issues, because we see it all the time. So my apologies if you didn't feel like I gave you what you needed for that decision. I felt we did, and I'll certainly look for any opportunities we can going forward to be able to incorporate anybody that has an opportunity in this.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Next item on the agenda is a request permission to schedule an executive session to discuss personal matters and also legal matters.
Entertain a motion to.
So moved. Second.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, the third item is consideration of adult ed program. And back in February, Ms. Boardman presented to you a review of our budget for this upcoming school year. And the expenditures and the revenues, and gave you just a ballpark figure as far as what was being spent where, and where our revenues are, and so on. And through the course of that conversation, the adult ed program was brought up, and also was brought up during the time that Lori discussed the budget. And during that time, it was brought up that $317,000 is deficit spending spent on the adult ed program.
Is that adult ed or is that?
When I refer to adult ed, I'm talking about the evening classes, and I'm also talking about the EMT, I'm talking about the LPN, everything. Yeah, just to clarify, that's a very good point.
It's everything.
Recently, Ms. Chrissy Russell, who was the then adult ed director, was hired as the assistant principal at the junior high school. Mr. King is trying to assume that duty, but honestly, it just looks like it's too much. So a decision was made to stop the evening classes, which have not started yet. They don't start until September. To stop those evening classes, and to also inform the LPN that there would be a year-long class, and then this would be the last for that class. Now, I can tell you this, that the adult ed program, Mr. King, SCTC has reached out to some about looking into taking on that program. There have been some discussions, and there will continue to be some discussions, but I just can't tell you right now what that's on. I'm not willing to go public with that right now as far as that discussion, okay, because it's not.
Am I dreaming or did we take action on some meeting where we?
It was discussed during an executive session, and this is to bring it out publicly,
Oh, all right.
okay?
Oh, we did.
It was discussed during executive.
I thought we did take.
I thought we did take action. Do we have to do it in open session?
I believe so.
I don't think we did.
I know it's discussed, but I don't know. I'd have, without going back and reviewing
You
it.
don't think we?
I don't think we discussed, we discussed it, I don't think we took.
I think we were waiting.
did.
Really,
Well, let's
wasn't
do
the air
this.
till what?
Let's do this.
Just
Let's
clarify
go ahead. It's my recommendation to go ahead and at the completion of the 2018-19 school year, that the adult program, ed program, come to a close.
But we're not, what about
I thought we were
No.
talking about having,
see, I thought we were gonna stop the night stuff.
No, no,
The
no.
night stuff now, but the LPN next year. That's what I
I think
thought.
we did vote that. I
That
think
is
we did
correct.
We
take
did
action.
vote on that.
I think we did take action on everything but
we already did.
everything but the LPN. I don't think
Yes.
we did anything on LPN.
No, I totally agree with you. Yeah, I think that's what we did.
Guys, without going back and look at the minutes, I don't believe we did. And so, I don't think we did.
It can't hurt to do it again.
So-
Right, well, that's,
And yeah, that's okay.
So honestly, what does it matter whether we did it before
Well, I just,
or not? And in a public meeting like this, you know, it's a recommendation to go ahead
I think the main thing was, instead of, like, when you said that you talked about adult ed ending after the 18-19, I think.
let me
we
say
already
this,
expressed-
Chad, the LPN program
Okay,
there we go.
but all, the other aspects are.
are closed.
Closed, okay,
Yes.
that's what, okay.
Are you recommending that?
Yes.
I move we accept your recommendation.
I second that.
before you vote, just want to make sure that the recommendation was a bit
Chad, second.
convoluted, so I want to make sure I got this right. I kind of had it, I'm sorry, Tom, I didn't mean it that way. We started discussing it, and I have that, I have the administration, tell me if I'm right, I'm sorry. That came out a bit wrong.
That's better.
I have that the administration recommended that the LPN and all adult education programs cease after the 18-19 school year. Is that correct?
What it should say is that the LPN program will conclude at the end of the 2018-2019 school year.
Okay.
The adult ed evening courses will not be, what do I want to say?
Not be
They will
offered.
will not be held during the 2018-2019 school year. Does that make sense?
Okay, okay. So it's a two-part,
Yeah.
meaning that the first one, the LPN program will conclude at the end of the 18-19 school year. And the adult night classes will conclude immediately.
Yes, immediately.
Okay.
Before we vote on that, is that final, or are they gonna look into self-funding these programs?
Self-funding the what? The
The adult ed at
evening
night
classes?
and possibly the LPN.
Well, we can always change that. I mean, they come back with a plan.
Scott, here's the thing, no, there will not be any discussion on that. That's not the
That's all my
recommendation.
question is.
No.
Are they looking into it?
There will not be any discussion on the evening classes. The only thing that's being looked into is that of how to deal with the LPN program, okay? And I'm not at liberty to discuss that right now because there's nothing that's been finalized, okay? And I just don't feel comfortable discussing that.
And just so we're on the same page, when Tom Reed gave the recommendation, that's okay with, in your motion and your second? Okay.
All right.
Will we read
Now,
that?
all those in favor? Any opposed?
Okay, I think this one's a little bit easier. Consideration of the 2018-2019 professional development plan. Mr. Mays?
Chuck, you got about
I'm very
2 hot
disappointed.
seconds.
Well, I try to make this as convoluted as I can. No, actually, this will be very fast, but if you do have questions, feel free to ask them. Annually, the PD committee of the district, which is our executive committee, needs to look at our PD plan. They requested that the academic principals participate as well, so we had our academic principals there and some of the central office administration. Basically what we look at, the district is required by state law, to use 1% of our state allocation for PD purposes. And this committee looks at how that money is going to be spent. And so what we basically did in this plan is we summarized the meeting that we had on May 15th. I did list also the additional sources of PD funds beyond the 1% money. You know, Lori and Lynn and I talk about federal funds that we receive. We'll also receive some funds with the Missouri Model District Grant this year, so that's included in there. But then we did go through it and list the budget for the actual expenditure of the 1% funds that we refer to. The PD goals are also listed. We actually set the PD goals last year. We have a 5-year cycle for our PD goals. The committee looked at those goals, declined to make any changes to them, and so those goals exist as they did before. I did request that the committee spell out in a little more detail the priorities of the committee, what they'd like to see us do for PD. If you look at those PD goals, they're a little vague on purpose to cover a lot of things, but I want a little more specifics about what exactly would you like to see us cover. And so those items are listed there as well. I will mention trauma-informed schools. You've heard us talk about a few times. That was on the list. And Nika and I have been working, and Tom's been involved also, on securing some PD in September and October with the teachers on trauma-informed schools. So that's one example of it.
Jeez.
We also listed the beginning teacher assistance program that we have for all of our first and second year teachers. We work with them. Of course, beginning of the year, we do new teacher orientation. Shannon does the bulk of the work on that. And then we have follow-up meetings every other month for the first 2 years. And then we listed the various forms that we have: tuition reimbursement, PD request, evaluation, etc. And so that's basically what we have in our plan. Did you have any questions?
Judge, do we have our long-term subs participate in professional development?
They're welcome to if they'd like to, yes.
Do they pay for it? Do they have to pay to participate? Do they have to pay to participate?
It would be district type. Yeah, I think that's, are you referring to like out of district or in
No,
district?
I mean in district, like subs that are, you know, full-time.
I was going to say, have to be our full-time subs to participate, or a substitute possibly doing a long-term leave might participate. And I'm talking more about our in-service. Is that what you're talking about? Or are you talking actually going to attend PD
Well,
activity?
probably both, really. I mean,
They have to be certified staff to participate in PD that we pay for out of the district.
okay.
So if they were certified staff, then we could
Okay.
do that.
But the in-service, they don't have to participate?
No, we can provide, they don't have to participate, they usually do participate if they're like if they're a full-time sub or a substitute doing a long-term leave, they'll usually come for the in-service.
Yeah.
Especially if it's, we kind of look at it on a case-by-case basis too, is it relevant for them to come? But most of the time, if they're doing a long-term substitute, it is relevant.
Just curious.
I hope I explained that well.
You did.
Did you get all
Better
that,
than
Mr.
Tom.
Convolution?
That must be the word of the day.
You want the full-time substitute?
School keeps
Yeah.
calling me. Mine drank twice. Yeah.
Yeah, all of you.
That's what I'm hearing down there.
It's the administration's recommendation to accept the professional development plan. That is if questions.
I think Lynn has a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's all right, Glenn.
Jeez,
I didn't see your hand go up.
The 5-year plan for professional development, is that the goals then of the?
Yes, those are the 3 goals of the plan. That's what we decide every 5 years. And those can be amended on a yearly basis. We did look at them again this year, and I talked to the committee about, would you like to do any revision of those? And they declined to revise them.
So, I'm just going, all right, we can do. What's the overall goal within this plan? Like the big picture goal is to achieve what?
Would be to increase student achievement would be the overall, that would be the main goal. But in all honesty, these 3 goals here are what are selected as the overall overarching goals of those three. I mean, you're always looking at student achievement, but those are the 3 goals that's how we hope to achieve those. As far as implementing a variety of research-based instructional strategies, using a variety of technology tools, and also to work on the district climate for PBS and PLCs. I don't think I'm answering your question, so help me understand what you...
I'll work through it. If I have questions, I'll call you. I just think, well, I know I'm looking for, I guess,
Like one goal?
well, you know, if my personal IDP, I have conferences I go to, books that I read, you know, there's a plan of, to help with my knowledge, my work, my efficiency, things of that nature.
You're looking like a mission statement, Glenn? Is that kind of what you're?
No, I don't know. I just, look, I'll read it. Let me just look
You
over
said
it.
there's some goals here at the bottom.
Yeah, I kind of saw that too. Just let me, I'll go through it and read it. I have questions.
And you say you were personal, is that what you just said too?
Yeah.
Okay, I will say too, that's not really referenced.
This is
Well, actually, I
district-
think it may be
This
referenced
is
here.
district-wide rather than.
It is, but every teacher also does an individual PD plan where they list the individual goals that they have, and of course, they're encouraged.
I guess
to
that's
these
what I'm looking
goals.
for, like, what are we doing with our teachers and to achieve these particular
You may have to
things?
help me, Ms. Hollowfield,
So that's probably what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
You don't have to give it to me. I'm just,
That's fine. but each one of the teachers does construct their own individual PD
Yeah.
plan based on these and other things they have, and also if they have deficiencies, they'll include those in as well.
I guess probably more of the strategies behind the goals is what I'm looking for. But what are the tactics that we're using to achieve those three things? That's all. That's just curiosity.
Okay,
Just-
but you're free to call me if you have more questions. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, Jim did want me to say too, that we do include the long-term substitute, I guess you're talking about the full-time long-term substitute, in the beginning teacher assistance things, beginning of the year, new teacher orientation.
Good.
Okay. So unless you guys have more questions,
Recommendation.
recommendation, yeah, to approve.
Administration recommended.
Motion.
What, motion? That's, all those in favor?
Uh,
Any opposed? Okay.
So that was Kyle and Glenn, right?
Correct.
Next, we have the consideration of the FY19 budget adjustment. Ms. Boardman.
Mr. King is always finding grants for us, and I think in this case he worked, I think maybe Mr. Trankler found it and then Mr. King helped him to write it. But they did receive, and the reason we're presenting it as budget adjustment, because we had not received the award notice at the time you all adopted the budget for this year. It had been written, the committee just did not meet until over the summer, but they wrote and received an American Welding Foundation Welder Workforce Grant in the amount of $17,184. This budget adjustment will increase revenues by that amount and expenditures by that amount, because it's not offsetting the cost of something they already had in the budget. He wrote for specific equipment that met the guidelines of their grant.
That's a
So this
net
will be
zero
a new
effect.
purchase.
It's a new purchase, but it's a net zero effect.
It's a net zero effect. And I did not provide grant codes to you, and I apologize, I know Brian likes to have that as an attachment, but we have not received even clarification of how under this new code system in the state of Missouri, even what level I put it at. So it will be an increase of revenues, increase of expenditures, that will be added to our system once somebody tells me what the numbers are.
And Lori, did you say this grant was specifically for those type items that were buying?
Yes, they listed specifically what, and this was not in Mr. Trankler's 18-19 budget. He would not have gotten this equipment had he not received the grant.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're always looking for money. They do a good job finding it.
Make a motion we approve the
Second.
budget adjustment.
Motion is second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Okay, and we have approval to pay bills through June of 2018.
There's
And do
a,
we need to do
yeah. we need
roll
to do
call?
roll
Did you have
call.
something on there?
Yeah, there was a check
Okay,
for that bus lease.
okay,
So
yeah.
I assume I need to abstain.
Same.
Yeah. So I guess we need to do a roll call.
Yes.
Yeah, roll call. Okay. Guess we need a motion and a second.
Second.
Ms. Stewart?
yes.
Mr. Cantrell?
Yes.
Mr. Prince?
Yes.
Ms. Becker?
Yes.
Mr. Alcorn?
Yes.
Mr. Cantor?
We have then the approval of pay bills of July 2018.
Oh, wait a minute, wait. I thought we were.
We can do it under
It is July, it is July. Dang it, I'm
Okay,
sorry,
we
I
can roll call here
apologize.
too, I
I
guess.
apologize, I got ahead of myself. Yep, roll call now. Oh, abstain from voting.
Second.
shoot, sorry.
Ms. Stewart?
Yes.
Mr. Cantrell?
Yes.
Mr. Boyce?
Yes.
Please. Yes. Mr. Kronbecker?
Yes.
Mr. Alcorn?
Yes.
Mr. Tanner?
Abstain. Sorry about that.
Lastly, we had the ratification of the support staff report.
There we go. Yeah, we need to do roll call with that as
Roll call.
well. Mhm.
So move.
Ms. Stewart?
Yes.
Mr. Cantrell?
Yes.
Mr. Boyce?
Yes.
Mr. Lees? Mr. Kronbecker?
Yes.
Mr. Alcorn? Mr. Tanner?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Tanner, I'll turn it over to you for consent agenda items.
Consent agenda items following approval of minutes for special session June 26, 2018, executive session June 26, 2018, special session July 3rd, 2018, executive session July 3rd, 2018, executive session July 18th, 2018, executive session July 31st, 2018, ratification of substitute teacher report, ratification of athletic workers report, approval of updated 2017-18 transportation ridership report, approval of gifted program appeals / selection committee, and sale of surplus property pursuant to policy DNAP textbooks. Entertain a motion to approve those under consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Now we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
However,
Oh,
if I'm not mistaken, on our support staff report and substitute teacher report are identical.
They should be. On your, on what's on
it's
your,
the same report, sure is, it's the same report. Good catch there, I looked at that earlier today.
When I looked at that with,
It wasn't the same when I looked at it at home.
yeah, it might be on this. but-
It is on this.
and
It
I-
says
I've
classified
lost my
staff
session,
hire.
so-
and you have the sub list.
Nope, it says
No.
classified staff hire on the other one
If you
too.
want to look at the sub list, I've got it right here.
Yep.
Yeah, make sure.
That's all I've got. I've got one. I got one copy, I'm sorry.
Everybody just make sure you don't have a.
Anybody on there?
That's the main thing I wanted.
I didn't see anything, but that doesn't mean that.
I can't go on there. Actually,
You just want to abstain from consent agenda and it'll pass anyway.
But does it not have to be a blood relative?
4th degree.
So by marriage, up
By
to
4th degree by marriage or blood. On hiring, it's different for contractors. But
Okay,
it's.
so Rebecca will abstain from the,
Abstain from the
consent
okay.
agenda.
from the consent agenda. Is that
Right,
okay with you?
right.
Okay. So we can move that one if we have to. All right. Call it in.
So, 4th degree, that wouldn't include me, would it, with Ashley? No.
I don't think so.
No.
Oh, goodness.
no, would not, would it?
She's your cousin-in-law, that can't count.
No.
I don't
Surely
think so.
not.
No.
As I say.
I wouldn't think.
Okay. Okay. I need a motion and a second.
We've got that.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, we got a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Go ahead.
Roll call.
She's
Or-
abstaining.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ms. Stewart,
Abstain.
Mr. Cantrell,
Yes.
Mr. Boyce, Mr. Lees, Mr. Kronbecker.
Yes.
Mr. Alcorn.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And we have convoluted some stuff tonight, man. I'm telling you.
I just wish you could.
You got time for a quick break before we go into?
No.